US President Donald Trump has cut financial aid to South Africa over a land law aimed at addressing the country's apartheid past. The law allows South Africa's government to seize land in certain situations where it's not being used or if it's in the public interest to be redistributed. Trump claims South Africa is confiscating land. His close ally Elon Musk, who was born in South Africa, alleges the law is racist. In cutting US aid, Trump also pointed to South Africa's case at the International Court of Justice, where it accused Israel of genocide in Gaza. It also accused South Africa of supporting bad actors, including Hamas, Russia, and Iran. Tuso Khumalo is in Johannesburg for us. He told me about the response of South Africa's government to Trump's executive order.
The government of President Cyril Ramaphosa here has categorically rejected all the assertions and the accusations that are made in the order that was signed by US President Donald Trump. In fact, the statement that was released by the Department of International Relations opens by saying it's unfortunate that all the contents of that order are based on inaccurate information, also saying it's regrettable that it doesn't appreciate that South Africa went through a difficult period, colonialism and apartheid, systems that dismantled people and caused a lot of inequality, which is what the government is trying to correct now. But it goes also further to say, to question why President Donald Trump is issuing or giving an offer to white Afrikaners to come to America and be refugees at a time when America is involved in massive arrests and deportations of people that are less privileged, and of course, refugees also included.
Is South Africa considering countermeasures against the US?
If you look at all what South Africa has said in this statement, South Africa says it is prepared to solve all misunderstandings and disputes using diplomatic means. This is also what President Cyril Ramaphosa said on his nation address on Thursday. He said South Africa will send envoys across Africa and abroad just to explain some of these policies that South Africa is implementing and why South Africa is to implement them because of apartheid. And of course saying everything will be solved amicable behind doors so that they get a solution to this. But it is also worth noting that it's not only South African government that has reacted. We've got a lot of organizations that have stood up. The Economic Freedom Fighters Party giving a statement this afternoon dismissing all the allegations that are in that order, dismissing them as lie. And of course, surprisingly, even some of the organizations that are being accused of fanning or encouraging Donald Trump to do this, they've come out to say they have been misquoted. This is not what they want. And of course, we had a tweet from the Secretary General of the African National Congress, Ramaphosa's party, that was tweeted this afternoon saying, "We shall not be bullied."
And just to explain to our viewers, the South African law that Trump references in his order concerns the distribution of land. What role has land played in South Africa's history during apartheid and also now?
If there's anything that hurt South Africans most during apartheid, it was losing their land. They were thrown out of their land. Their land was taken by force by those who benefited from the apartheid system. So they were left landless. So when people went to war, to the liberation war, their first priority was to get their land back, which is what the government is doing now. But unfortunately, 30 years later after democracy, we find 70% of that land still in the hands of the minority, whites, mostly largely Afrikaners. So it is this that the government is trying to address as how the government is explaining it, to try and use legislation like the Expropriation Act to try and redistribute this land, share it equally. Of course, it emphasizes also it's not going to be done illegally. It's going to be done within the law, expropriation with compensation. Only in some cases where the owners cannot be located, then it will be confiscated or expropriated without compensation. But the government emphasizes that everything that it does, it is going to do according to the law and according to the Constitution.
DW's Tuso Khumalo in Johannesburg. Chris Benpiri is spokesperson for the South African Minister of International Relations and Cooperation. How is South Africa preparing to react to Trump's executive order, first of all?
Well, firstly, it's important to note that the executive order is based on false information. The act that we are referring to and you are referring to in your insert is called the Expropriation Act, which is similar to the eminent domain laws of the United States, and I believe even Germany would have such a similar law. It's not a land seizure act. It's not a land seizure law at all. It's very detailed on how expropriation without compensation can take place, under which specific scenarios, and it has to be adjudicated and authenticated by a competent authority, which also includes the courts of law. So it's important to place that into context to show that the executive action that has now been actioned by the United States of America is based on misinformation and, quite frankly, propaganda, which has reached the highest echelons quite evidently in the United States. On the question of aid in particular, the aid that we are speaking of is the PEPFAR program, which in our fiscus, at least in our health department, constitutes 17% of that program. Of that program, particularly the funding of ARVs and HIV and AIDS medication, that is funded for by the fiscus. So South Africa will still be able, by and large, to at least purchase this antiretroviral treatment so that people are able to get their treatment. Where it becomes a little bit difficult is that PEPFAR funding that we got through USAID was able to augment the government's program from educative programs and ensuring that the civil society organizations that we have in our country are able to augment the government's program. And they have done incredible work in at least spreading the message around how to condomize and how to prevent further spread of the HIV and AIDS virus, which we know is quite prevalent in the Southern African region. So that is where the harm, if you like, occurs the most. And that is what we will try to mitigate through our fiscus.
How will South Africa be able to step up to the plate and cover this funding shortfall?
Like I say, in the main, it affects mostly non-governmental organizations, so the government program itself is not affected. But at least we are now in a new budgetary cycle, and we do anticipate that our Minister of Defense will have to look at measures of how we can mitigate that shortfall for civil society organizations, non-governmental organizations. That is something that our Finance Department and the Ministry of Health are working hard to mitigate.
At the same time, is South Africa considering countermeasures?
Well, we're not at that stage yet. What we are insisting on is proper dialogue with our counterparts in the United States. We don't think that it is feasible to constantly conduct relations on falsehoods and on misinformation. We think that a lot that the United States seems to understand about South Africa currently can be corrected through the diplomatic channel. So directly to your question, not as yet. There's no plan to retaliate in any way. We believe that diplomatic disputes can be resolved through diplomatic engagement.
What about the other dispute that we brought up? Trump also referred to your country's genocide case against Israel in Gaza at the International Court of Justice in The Hague. How much international opposition is South Africa willing to accept in pursuing its case?
It's a matter that's sub judice. It's already before the courts. We expect that Israel will be able to respond in June this year, and then the ICJ will be able to adjudicate the matter. It's not a matter that we took on lightly, but it's a matter that we took on in pursuit of our own obligations in terms of the Genocide Convention. And you may know, one of the things that at least Western democracies have always chided African countries on is the respect of international law. And that's exactly what we seek to put forward through the ICJ case. And, one of the falsehoods that are constantly peddled is the idea that we got this funding for the case from Iran, or we are in the same bed as Hamas. These are some of the rumors that we have seen being peddled and falsehoods that are being peddled. We are a sovereign state pursuing our foreign policy in an independent manner, but also acting consistently with the United Nations Charter and international law. And if some Western nations have decided that international law should not be exercised by an African country, then maybe that is a conversation that must be had in the open, but it mustn't be masqueraded in the manner in which it's being masqueraded on us now.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your response here on DW News. Crispin Perry, spokesperson for South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation.
Thank you very much.